Let us step inside a dark room together. Imagine standing in an empty hallway late at night. There are no lights on. The cold air feels heavy and frozen. If we flash a small light down the corridor, we see absolutely nothing. Logically, we know this space is safe. No predators hunt here. No one hides in the shadows. By all accounts of reason, an empty room should offer total peace because nothing exists to hurt us. Yet our biology completely rejects this logic. As we stand here, a sudden chill bends our comfort. Our heart rate locks into a dangerous rhythm. A cold knot tightens in the stomach, and a deep instinct warns us to run. Why does absolute nothingness hunt our sanity? Why does a vacant corner trigger a violent fight or flight response? The answer forces us to look past the physical world. This discomfort does not belong to the room itself. Our mind actively manufactures the threat. When external data drops to zero, the brain panics and alters reality to fill the void. Our eyes do not show the room, but project our deepest internal anxieties onto the walls. We are not afraid of the dark, but afraid of our own mind turning against us. This psychological glitch opens a door to a much deeper mechanism, a survival design that forces us to question if we can ever truly trust our own senses. Think about the last time you felt a pair of invisible eyes staring at your neck in an empty house. You turned around fast, expecting a monster, but found only a blank wall. Your eyes lied to you, your ears twisted the silence, and your skin crawled for no physical reason. We must ask ourselves a deeply unsettling question. If our own brain can create a monster out of nothing, how do we know that the reality we see every single day is actually real, or just another trick designed to keep us alive? This hidden biological deception leads us into a far greater mystery. It forces us to uncover the silent code that governs our evolutionary panic, exposing the exact moments when our built-in defenses completely hijack our eyes. To understand why the mind creates monsters, we must first look closely at the exact texture of our discomfort. There is a profound difference between pure terror and the unsettling feeling we call creepiness. Terror is a sharp, immediate response to a clear and present danger. If a person stands in front of a hungry wolf, they do not feel creepy, they feel pure fear. The threat is obvious, the rules are set, and the brain instantly knows what to do to survive. Creepiness, however, operates in a completely different psychological realm because it thrives entirely on ambiguity. It is the uncomfortable gray area where we cannot tell if we are completely safe or in deadly danger. It is the feeling we get when something is slightly off, but we cannot quite put our finger on what is wrong. Many psychologists define this state as a direct reaction to a lack of clarity. The human mind is an incredible sorting machine that spends every single second of the day placing the world into neat, predictable boxes. When the world follows these rules, our brain runs smoothly in the background, consuming very little energy because everything makes sense. But when an object or a place breaks these boundaries, a severe cognitive glitch occurs. This brings us directly to the concept of transitional spaces, often known as liminal environments. These are locations built specifically for large crowds and heavy human activity that suddenly find themselves completely empty, quiet, and dark. Think about a massive shopping mall at midnight, a deserted school hallway during summer break, or a silent hospital waiting room. During the day, these places are full of bright lights, moving bodies, and familiar noises. They are vibrant centers of life. But when we encounter them in total isolation and darkness, they lose their original meaning. They are caught between what they used to be and what they are right now, serving no active purpose. The human brain completely detests this kind of existential vacuum. When a person steps into a dark, empty office building, the visual system recognizes the familiar desks, but the total absence of human life creates a massive conflict in our perception. The environment feels half familiar and half alien, causing the brain to stumble over its own definitions. This psychological friction triggers what experts call a mental stun lock. When the mind cannot decide whether a situation is safe or unsafe, it enters a state of intense paralyzed hesitation. In a normal situation, the brain quickly chooses between fighting a threat or running away from it. But in an ambiguous space, there is nothing to fight and nothing to run from. The brain wants to relax because the room is technically empty, but it also wants to scream because the environment feels unnatural. This internal contradiction places a heavy tax on our emotional state. We find ourselves trapped in a loop of constant checking where our thoughts spin around a single question that has no clear answer. This hesitation creates a deep, lingering anxiety that feels much heavier than a sudden scare. The mind is forced to stay on maximum alert, burning massive amounts of mental fuel while it waits for a sign that will tip the scale towards safety or danger. During this cognitive freeze, the brain undergoes a profound shift in how it processes reality. Since the outside world is not providing enough clear data to resolve the mystery, the mind turns up the volume on all of our internal senses. Every small sound is amplified, every shadow becomes longer, and every tiny change in air pressure feels like a physical touch. The brain is desperately searching for any clue that can break the tie between safety and threat. It becomes hypervigilant, turning ordinary reality into a minefield of potential warnings. This is the exact moment when the psychological turns into the physical, where a simple thought begins to alter what we actually see and hear. The tension inside the head becomes so great that it must express itself outwardly, forcing the mind to prepare for a danger that has not even arrived yet. This silent paralysis is not a random mistake, but a very specific state of readiness that bridges the gap between our modern surroundings and our ancient survival programming. The mind refuses to leave the mystery unsolved because in the history of our species, an unsolved mystery in the dark usually meant an early death. When we feel that thick, suffocating sense of unease in an empty room, we are experiencing the raw machinery of our mind trying to force a conclusion out of thin air. The brain hates a blank canvas, and when reality refuses to give it a clear answer, the mind prepares to write its own story using the darkest ink it can find. This uncomfortable hesitation does not just leave us waiting in the quiet, it actively sets the stage for a much deeper biological takeover where our eyes stop looking at the actual room and begin to serve an ancient blueprint designed to protect us from things we cannot even see. When we peel back the layers of our modern lives, we find that our daily comfort relies on a biological contract signed by our ancestors hundreds of thousands of years ago. To understand why our minds build terrifying figures in the dark, we must examine the ancient rules of survival that run inside our neural pathways. The brain carries a deep history of a world where being wrong about a threat meant immediate death. Long before concrete cities existed, humans lived in wild environments where danger hid behind every single tree and rock. In that brutal landscape, nature did not reward animals that spent time thinking logically about every strange sight. Instead, it rewarded the ones that acted on pure instinct, prioritizing safety over absolute truth. This ancient reality shaped a specific cognitive rule that governs our perception today, a system that prefers to create a terrifying illusion rather than risk a fatal mistake. To see this system in action, let us picture an early human walking through a dense forest at dusk. The light is fading fast, and the trees throw long shadows across the ground. Suddenly, a bush a few feet away rustles loudly. In that fraction of a second, the brain faces a crossroads and must choose between two paths of logic. The first path is to assume that the sound is completely harmless, just a gentle gust of wind. If they guess it is the wind and it turns out to be a hiding predator, their life ends right there. Their genetic line stops instantly. The second path is to assume that the rustling bush contains a lethal creature. If the human chooses this path, their body floods with adrenaline and they run away in total panic. If it turns out to be just a breeze, they have wasted a little energy and felt a moment of unnecessary fear, but they remain fully alive. Through millions of years of evolution, nature consistently wiped out individuals who chose the first path, leaving only the descendants of the second option. We are the grandchildren of the most paranoid primates to ever walk the earth. Our minds are hardwired to mistake a harmless shadow for a living threat, because a false alarm keeps us alive, while a single moment of relaxed optimism could end us forever. When you sit in a dark room today, your brain does not care about the security of your home or the lock on your front door. It only cares about the ancient law of probability that has kept our species alive for generations. It deliberately activates your alarm system, manufacturing a monster out of nothing because it is biologically cheaper to panic over a jacket on a door than to be caught off guard by a real attacker. This defensive paranoia instantly alters the way our visual system interprets the quiet shapes around us. The second pillar of this biological takeover involves our absolute obsession with recognizing human patterns. Humans are intensely social creatures, and our existence depends on our ability to look at another being and read their intentions immediately. Because of this dependence, the brain contains a sensitive face-finding machine that operates outside of our conscious awareness. We are so desperate to find faces that we see them in random places, from the front grille of a car to a burnt piece of toast or the shapes of clouds in the sky. In a bright room, our eyes receive clear data, which keeps this pattern-matching machine under control. But when the lights go out, the quality of our visual information drops to 0%, leaving the brain with nothing but blurry edges and vague contrasts. When faced with this empty canvas, the pattern machine works much harder to find a match. It takes the chaotic details of a dark room and forces them into a shape that it recognizes as a living entity. A pile of laundry on a chair becomes a crouched figure ready to spring. The outline of a window frame becomes a tall person standing completely still in the corner. A shadow thrown across the floor becomes a long arm reaching out from beneath the bed. The mind creates these images because an unexpected human in the dark is the ultimate survival threat. By turning a harmless piece of furniture into a living agent with malicious intent, the brain forces us to stay focused on that specific spot, ensuring we do not look away until we are safe. This intense focus leads us directly into the third mechanism of our internal theater, which neuroscientists call the guessing engine. For a long time, people believed that the eyes worked like a movie camera, sending a clean picture of the outside world to the back of the head. Today we know that reality is the exact opposite. The brain is a predictive machine that constantly builds a model of the world based on our memories, expectations, and deepest fears before our eyes even finish processing the light. When we walk into a dark room, our vision fails us completely, and the brain loses its connection to the physical world. In that moment of sensory deprivation, the fear center of the mind, known as the amygdala, steps forward and takes absolute control of our perception. Without real visual data to keep it grounded, the amygdala begins to feed the guessing engine with our darkest internal thoughts. It reaches deep into our personal libraries of memory, pulling out scenes from horror movies we watched years ago, ghost stories we heard as children, and deep-seated anxieties that we try to ignore during the day. It takes these invisible emotional fears and paints them directly onto the dark spaces in front of us, turning an ordinary room into a physical manifestation of our subconscious mind. When we stare into a pitch-black doorway and feel a sudden surge of terror, we are not looking at a physical creature waiting for us in the dark. We are looking at a literal projection of our own thoughts brought to life by a protective brain that would rather terrify us with an imaginary monster than let us walk blindly into an unknown danger. The concrete realities of our modern world have built a completely new kind of trap for our ancient biology. We no longer walk through dark swamps or deep forests looking for dangerous predators, but we constantly walk through massive stone structures that confuse our old survival programming. Think about the stark design of an empty apartment complex, a deserted subway station, or a long office hallway at midnight. These places are full of repeating lines, identical doors, and sterile white walls that completely remove the natural variety our eyes expect to see. In a forest, a strange shape is easily explained away as a random branch or a twisted piece of rock. But in a perfectly smooth concrete corridor, any unusual shadow stands out, like a dark stain on a clean white sheet. The brain cannot find a natural excuse for this visual flaw, so it instantly labels the anomaly as a threat. Our pattern detector goes into overdrive because the environment feels too perfect, too artificial, and completely devoid of life. We find ourselves wandering through areas that look completely clean on the surface, but feel deeply wrong to our primitive instincts. This geometric perfection strips away our visual comfort, forcing our awareness to plunge deep into the terrifying reality of modern silence. True silence does not exist anywhere in the natural world. Even in the deepest part of the night, a natural landscape is completely alive with small noises. You can hear insects chirping in the grass leaves, rustling in the breeze, and distant animals moving through the brush. To our ancient ancestors, a completely quiet forest was the ultimate warning sign. It meant that a major predator had entered the area, causing all the smaller creatures to freeze and go completely quiet out of sheer survival panic. When a modern human steps into a heavily insulated concrete room where all outside city noise is cut off, the brain interprets that absolute silence as an immediate emergency. The mind does not experience this quiet as a moment of peace, but as a tense countdown before a violent attack. We become permanent prisoners of our own expectations, waiting for the sound of a threat that our biology swears must be coming out of the void. To break this suffocating quiet, the brain automatically turns its internal audio volume all the way up to 100%. It starts to amplify the sound of your own heavy breathing, the steady rushing of blood through your ears, and the small creaks of the building settling in the cold. Because the mind is operating on maximum alert, it cannot accept these noises as harmless background data. It takes the tiny rhythmic sound of your heartbeat and twists it into the faint thud of footsteps approaching from behind. It takes the soft whistle of air moving through a ventilation shaft and shapes it into a low whisper coming from the dark corner of the room. You are not actually hearing an intruder, but your own biology turning up the gain on reality, desperate to find a sound before the imagined threat strikes. The silence becomes an active enemy, a heavy weight that squeezes your chest until your own mind snaps the tension by inventing a presence. This constant auditory distortion feeds our growing panic, convincing our rational mind that we are no longer alone in the dark. This acoustic pressure naturally triggers the final psychological trick of isolation, which is the vivid sensation of being watched. When you stand alone in a wide open space like an empty parking garage, an abandoned warehouse, or a dark basement, your field of vision can only cover a small fraction of the environment. Your brain is fully aware that your body is completely exposed from the sides and from behind, leaving you vulnerable to anything hidden in the dark. Because it is physically impossible for two eyes to watch every single angle at once, the mind creates a powerful illusion to keep you vigilant. It generates a prickling heat on the back of your neck, a deep certainty that eyes are locked onto your spine from the shadows. This feeling is not a psychic connection or a spiritual message. It is a harsh biological mechanism designed to force you to turn around, ensuring you do not let your guard down when your back is turned to the dark. The brain creates a watcher out of nothing, just to make sure you keep moving towards safety, using your own discomfort as a tool to guarantee your survival. This constant state of alert shows how our modern spaces manipulate our deepest fears, turning simple architecture into a psychological battleground where our own senses betray us. We are constantly forced to fight against an invisible enemy that our own nervous system keeps bringing to life. This continuous cycle of internal projection ensures that the spaces we build to shield ourselves from the outside world become the very incubators of our deepest terrors. Let us take a step back and turn off the light. As we stand together in the quiet dark, the weight of the room changes. We have dismantled the science and mapped the ancient pathways of our survival programming. We often treat the monsters our brain creates as a defect or a foolish sign of weakness. We feel embarrassed when a harmless shadow makes our chest tighten. But the raw truth of evolutionary psychology reveals a different story. The terrifying figure your mind builds in the dark is actually a beautifully designed shield. It is proof of a biological machine that cares so much about your survival that it chooses to terrify you with 100 false alarms just to keep you alive for one more day. We are never truly alone because our protective instincts always walk beside us. Yet this comfort hides a far more unsettling reality that we cannot easily escape. If our brain possesses the absolute power to manufacture a living threat out of thin air, we must question the very foundation of our senses. When you look at the world around you during the day, are you truly seeing objective reality? Or is your mind just projecting another useful fiction to keep you moving forward? If your eyes can lie to you so perfectly in the shadows, how do you know your brain is not rewriting the whole world right now? Think about the everyday spaces you trust and the things you swear are real. What if every single thing we touch and see is just a beautifully controlled hallucination, an evolutionary trick designed to hide a dark truth we are far too weak to face? We would love to hear your personal thoughts on this mental deception in the comments down below. Do you completely trust your own eyes, or do you believe your mind is playing a much larger game against you? If you're brave enough to dive deeper into the darkest corners of human psychology, hit that subscribe button and leave a like if you made it to the very end. I'm Beyond the Creep, and I'll see you in the next dark corner.